Hi, y'all. Welcome to Hope and Hell, a sit down interview series chronicling the events of me and my coworkers at the organization known as Hope and Help. We have Anita Nunes here today with us.
Hey, Erin.
Hi. Anita Nunes is the co director of Neighborhood Fridge. It's a grassroots organization in the Central Florida area providing free food to underserved communities. She's also a very skilled herbalist with traditional knowledge of ecology, medicine. That she's also been able to use in her work as a harm reductionist and health educator. Welcome. We are so happy to have
Thanks
you.
for having me.
How you feeling?
Good. Happy to be sitting here.
So I know the past couple of months have been tumultuous, crazy.
hmm
So the first question I want you to answer is kind of talk me through your first week at Hope and Help. What was that like? What did you witness? What were you privy to?
Oh, Lord, I didn't make it 4 days. First off, I was really excited to get this job. Lamia reached out and asked if I wanted to be a harm reduction health specialist. And I was familiar with the work of harm reduction, but I had never held a position. So I was like, yeah, actually, that sounds like right up my alley. Um, the first 3 days went really smooth, and I was just excited to be meeting the participants and getting a feel for the job and the opportunity the work presented. But day 4, we had our all hands meeting. So I came into work and was made aware that there was going to be a full staff meeting about gender identity and pronoun usage in the office.
Okay.
And so at first thought, I was like, okay, that's kind of cool actually that like an organization would go so far as to provide that for its staff. And I was a little excited about it. And then it started, and basically, it was a lot of people in that room. I don't know how many. I want to say it was like 50, maybe 50, 60 people, the majority of the staff of Hope and Help. And as the presenter who uses they, them pronouns was going on and explaining what gender identity is and the various uses of pronouns, what a non binary person is, etc., I was kind of surprised at how much pushback there was in the room and the overall just like kind of like unwillingness to listen and be like active listeners, like there was definitely, I'd say, a lack of curiosity. And what was coming up for most people seemed to be their own insecurities. And it ended up going from just kind of like uncomfortable to like downright violent to the point where like all of the trans people employed at Hope and Help left pretty much immediately after, except for myself. And I'm just like sitting there waiting, like shaken to my core, like why am I still here, like why have I not also left? And my manager Lamia was like, no, you should really just like go take the rest of the day to like process and be chill, because that was crazy. But basically, like, I don't even know how to recap that. It was definitely like 2.5 hours of like knockdown, drag out, cis people trying to explain trans identity experience, talking over trans people in the room. Like,
It became personal.
it became really personal. It was like a lot of people airing out like any issue they've ever had with a trans person. Um, and a lot of people trying to like explain what trans people go through. And in particular, it was coming mostly from cis white men who were explaining what trans experience was. So like this is my 4th day in this organization, and I found myself like literally having to stand up and address basically the entire staff of this new organization and be like, "Hi, I'm one of like 4 token transsexuals in this like 80-person plus office. Let me now like give you some of the most intimate and personal details about my life, trigger warning, sex work, murder, etc., suicide, loss of life, and just air it all out so that we can have a little more like presence, understanding, awareness of the issues that we're talking about here and why it's unacceptable that you're kind of making it about you and how your feelings got hurt because somebody, tried to get you to use their pronouns."
So this is your first day. This is
Fourth
your
day.
fourth day
Fourth day.
within an organization already. You can tell
It was wild.
like the climate is unstable. Like
Yeah.
it's very transphobic. They're not open to addressing people with the correct pronoun usage. There's a lot of
No.
pushback. Was there anything else that happened during that all hands meeting that may have felt like things were escalating?
So at the head of the room was Wesley Golan, the human resources manager, who was sort of acting as kind of like an MC for the event. And
Was
he
he trans?
no, he's a cis white man. He was trying to explain basically anytime it got a little heated between anybody in the room, he sort of was trying to step in and say like, no, like, yeah, that's fine, or that's happened, but like everything's fine here. Like he was kind of trying to like sweep things under the rug. And when he eventually failed at doing so, like the executive director, Lisa Barr, then stepped in and just tried to, I don't know, just take up way too much space. Like she just made it about herself. Like, well, if I've ever done anything or I've ever said anything, I would never want to have done that. And that was never my intention. Right after the trans presenter who had been giving kind of the content of the whole event had said, like, look, like all we're asking is ask somebody their pronouns, use their pronouns. If you mess it up, just like say sorry, use the right pronoun, move on, and don't make a big deal out of it. So like she then goes on to like take up all this space about, you know, how she could never, and it was never her intention, and this and that, and I don't know. It just got so far removed from those simple asks of like, what are your pronouns? I'm gonna use your pronoun. I messed it up. Sorry, here's the right one. Like, it left that realm and just got like pretty ugly. I remember Morgan Manry, who sat there. He sat directly behind me, and this was the first time I laid eyes on him, and I immediately got the impression. I was like, oh, okay, this is somebody to watch out for, because Lori was kind of piping up and being like, hey, like, can you stop with the comedic relief, like addressing him?
And who's Lori?
Lori, I don't know what Lori's title is at Hope and Help.
But she was in the prevention department, maybe.
Maybe.
Okay.
Yes.
But she was employed by the organization.
Yeah.
Okay,
No, everyone in the room except for the people. One person presenting is an employee of the organization.
Okay.
But Lori spoke up to say to Morgan, you know, don't make light of this. This isn't a laughing matter. Like, this is serious. We're talking about people's lives and people dying. And he turned around and snapped at her, basically like giving a low key threat, being like, I'm not joking. If you want to, you know, not take this as a fact, then we'll take this up outside after the meeting, type of thing. And Lori was like, okay, like, bet, like, we can do that, which is really inappropriate. Like, A, centering yourself, B, like laughing at something, you know, when people are talking about, you know, how trans people are basically the highest in all of these negative statistics, you know, like drug usage and homelessness and loss of life. And like, it's not a time to be like a cis white man with all this privilege, like laughing at those things. And then to be corrected and checked by one of your coworkers, then to mock that coworker and issue like a threat, basically.
Of violence, yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay, like definitely remembering this dude's face and name. And yeah.
And that was your first like interaction from
First.
afar with Morgan Manry, correct?
Not my last, but yes.
Okay, got it. And was there any follow-up from upper management, human resources post that meeting? Did they talk to their trans staff members? Did they show any concern, any regard for progress, what things that they were going to work on?
Wes brought me into his office and he was just like, how are you? Are you okay? And I was like, yeah, I'm fine. I mean, keep in mind that was like what, day 5 of me being in a brand new organization. So I'm not like going to like spill my guts out and be like, hey, that was kind of crazy. So I was just like, get me out of this office. Lisa called me in, I think, eventually, but it had nothing to do with that. She just wanted to, like, according to her, just get to know me as a new employee. So she asked me just random questions about we mostly talked about, like, my garden. Like, that was it. The only follow through I really saw was them, like, cancel all future DEI meetings, cancel all future all hands meetings. So rather than there being any, like, further accountability, they actually just sort of removed the platform for larger accountability by shutting down the organization's ability to sort of come together as a whole and discuss issues like that.
So post an all hands meeting in regards to, you know, trans inclusion in the workspace going awry, their response is to cancel over a course of months DEI meetings.
And all future all hands meetings. I mean, that was the one and only all hands meeting that we ever had
during your tenure.
During my tenure at Hope and Help, yeah. Okay. And it was very clear that it got out of hand, and rather than having any kind of accountability or follow-up, they just cut it off. They're like, well, let's just not do that again. It set a bad precedent. So I was like, okay, so there's going to be no recourse. The person who made that call was Wes, the HR person. I was like, you're definitely, you know, somebody who's not going to, like, make any real change at all. Like,
now to your point about, you know, setting a precedence, I want to know what the office culture was like for you post that all hands meeting.
It was incredibly oppressive, honestly. I felt super alienated, especially having to divulge so much personal information, like, right off the bat. it definitely felt like it kind of put like a, I don't know, not a target, but I just felt like more observed, I guess, like
Mm-hmm.
hyper visible, especially just as like a non-binary trans person who doesn't like present, you know, typical femme. I just got a lot of like side eye and people being like we have gender neutral bathrooms. There was like with urinal, without urinal, and I would definitely catch like a lot of side eye like coming out of the one without the urinals, and I was like, I mean, 9 times out of 10, this is just the cleaner bathroom anyways, so like, can it
Mm-hmm.
really not be a big deal? But whatever. The janitor had it out for me. He definitely was like super transphobic and harassed me pretty much throughout like my entire time there. There was like no one to really go to because I pretty much immediately was painted this picture of like HR isn't going to do anything except for kind of just sort of sweep things under the rug and try and prevent there being conversation
Mm-hmm.
about any issues that might be in the work culture. Um, the surveillance thing was like really crazy. Like the janitor is also or I guess maintenance person is also paid to spy on the organization's employees and report to upper management. Um, it's not like I was ever doing anything other than my job, but just like the fact that he was singling me out, like looking for something that I
Mm-hmm.
was, I felt like it was a combination of like A, my trans identity, because he is like objectively transphobic, and B, the fact that I was working in harm reduction and with participants who use drugs. Like the stigma against people who use drugs was transferring over onto not just me, but the other members of my team and the harm reduction program at Hope and Help.
When you're saying surveillance, can you go into that some more? Like, in what ways was this janitor in specific surveilling?
Like there's no need to come around and like check an empty trash bag like 6 times in a shift. Like when you know very well that like there's maybe like nothing else in there.
Was he
Um,
taking pictures?
taking pictures of people, recording people behind their back. I mean, and going so far as to like record people, take it to upper management, and upper management being like, okay, but like that person is literally watching a training video. Like you're definitely doing too much. I mean, this is someone who watches cops on their lunch break by themselves in the back corner of a cafeteria. Like,
Huh?
yeah, like someone who takes their secret spy role like a little too seriously.
My God.
It's like, girl, there's really, it's not that serious.
All right. I do have a follow up question for you based on the expose, the details shared in the expose video. I want to know what happened exactly on October 6th with Morgan Manry.
Morgan Manry.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you were there, and there's an emergency food pantry that provides food assistance to food insecure people. Most of the participants in our program are food insecure.
Mm-hmm.
So oftentimes people would ask us, like, hey, can I get one of those grocery bags or the snack bags? And we would go. All of that is kept under lock and key and like highly kind of policed in this weird way. It's just hard to understand like why a paper bag with like peanut butter crackers and some applesauce is like such a high priority item that requires like key access by only like 2 employees in the whole organization. I don't know. It was getting a little weird. Most of the other people that we worked with felt similarly. Like this shouldn't be a problem. There shouldn't be this barrier to access for a bag of peanut butter and crackers to people who are literally experiencing homelessness and
Right.
hunger. So they would often lend us our key, which when Morgan found out, he decided to change the locks without informing anybody else. I just felt like for whatever reason, he felt the need to like control our ability. I don't know really what it was because every time we got a snack bag, we would fill out a form and a QR code. So
So it
it's
was
like, we're not doing
documented.
this secretly. Like you can track exactly what we're taking. So we went to go use the key and it didn't work. So approached Morgan Manry and was like, hey, like, can you get us a grocery bag? And with all the condescension in the world, he looked at both of us and said, where is your master? Like, I can't even say it the way he said it because it's just like, it was too much. We didn't respond. We just sort of like looked at him. And I think like the most sound we made was kind of like like, oh, okay. Um, and then he elaborated, like, he's like, oh, okay, we're not talking. Well, your master, where's Lamia, your manager? I'm referring to your manager, which we still didn't respond. I was in shock personally. I was just like, did he really just say that to like both of us? That's so crazy. Especially given like there's no context. Like I don't know you. Like I've never had a
Right.
conversation with you. You work in this organization. I'm just trying to get a bag of groceries. Like what where is this coming from?
So to be clear, white cishet man
Yes.
is speaking to you, a trans woman, and a black employee,
Yeah.
myself. and asks out of the blue, unprovoked, "Where is your master?" as a way of asking where your manager is.
Yeah, that's exactly what. And the intention was obvious. It was just so apparent that he was like dripping with condescension. Like, again, like I would describe many of his actions as gleeful. Like, usually he would be like, I don't know, taking some kind of satisfaction in denying somebody something, or I don't know. But then he went on, since we still weren't responding, and he's talking about we were in front of the chain link fence where he also has all of the office supplies locked up, which whatever. If you feel the need to protect your erasers and like number 2 pencils to that degree, like I won't hold it against you. But you were looking off through the chain link fence, and he's like, "What's the matter, Eric? Like, you don't like the chain link fence? Does it make you uncomfortable?" Yeah, a lot of people don't like the chain link fence, which also made me just kind of be like, oh my goodness, like this man is diabolical.
Clearly
like,
trying to provoke.
very much so,
Opposite.
trying to get any kind of rise, especially since we weren't responding to him, which we never did. So got said grocery bag, went off, handed it to the person, who was thankful for the food assistance. And then I was like, let's go to upper management, like right now, because that is unacceptable. That kind of behavior and language should never be used in any context, especially this one.
Obviously, that made you feel uncomfortable. Like, that was just an outrageous thing to experience. Was
Yes.
this ever reported to upper management, HR?
Sure did. Sure went and sat with Mr. Wesley again and spelled it all out. Pretty sure the most documentation I ever saw was him taking some notes on a sticky pad. And yeah, he then proceeded to do nothing. And, when continued to be asked for like probably 2 months, like never answered, never resolved it, just sort of like, oh, I'll get to it, or I don't even remember his excuses because they became so inane and repetitive that it's like hard for me to keep track of like what he was saying. But it was just obvious that he had no intention of taking any kind of disciplinary action against this senior employee who, to be honest, is responsible for bringing in a huge amount of money into the organization. And to me,
Yes.
it always felt like that took precedence over any kind of discrimination that took place.
Wow. Were there any prior instances where Morgan Manry exhibited these behaviors or had these, instances reported to upper leadership, upper management? Was this a first time issue?
From what I heard, no. He had several documented issues with HR specifically pertaining to discrimination. I'm pretty sure not just by race, but also like gender in the past.
Wow.
Yeah.
Interesting. So did an investigation take place? Was there anything, a follow-up done from HR, upper management?
Never.
Lisa?
No. You called for one. You went so far as to write a letter to the board of the organization, who replied with a very just like matter of fact, like, no, essentially. Like, yeah, thanks for trying, but internal issues won't be discussed. Everything's being done according to the book, la, la, la. Like, it's giving like this is a racket and like this is one of our golden boys, so we could never do anything to go against who he is or what he does for us, and don't you try again. Basically, it was giving very much like the help needs to sit down.
So just to be clear, white man asks you where your master is in the presence of another coworker. This is corroborated. The evidence has been provided. This was reported to HR. This was well documented.
Yep.
No follow-up. A letter was written to the board of the organization.
Yep.
Nothing was done.
Nope.
My God. Okay.
It didn't stop there though, because then one of the senior directors senior officers of the organization and the officer of compliance wrote a letter to the board. And at that point they said, oh, okay, well, you are our grant writer and therefore it might be, somebody we need to be accountable to. And when she wrote said letter, and this is a black woman we're speaking about, she approached the board. They did reply to her and say that they were going to launch an impartial and fair investigation of the matter, by which they meant that they would be using the very same attorney representing them in a racial discrimination case as the person heading up said fair and impartial investigation. If that isn't a conflict of interest,
I don't know what is.
I don't know what is.
My goodness. All right, so I want to fast forward to another event that took place February 2nd between you and the aforementioned janitor, Sam. What? Tell me about that. What happened? What took place then?
A real villain. So basically, like the entire time I had worked there since that all hands meeting, this person never once used my name, never once gendered me correctly, and only ever went out of his way to misgender me or refer to me as like sir and mister and all that kind of stuff. And I would correct him, and he would just sort of like ignore me. I mean, he just ignored me. Like at first, like I'm a pretty, I don't know, like Cuban people are always gonna say hello, good morning, good afternoon. It's just very much like a part of the culture. So every time I'd see him, I'd be like, hey. At first, I was like, okay, maybe it's a language thing. I know he's Puerto Rican, so I'd be like, buenos dias, buenas mañanas, like nothing, nothing. And then after a while, I was like, okay, dude is maybe deaf. So then I was like, let me just talk louder. No. Then I realized that he was just ignoring me, not the people around me. So I was like, oh, okay, you're actually doing this on purpose. Got it. Then I was like, you know what? Trans people are used to dealing with a lot. So I was like, I'm not going to like push any further on this. I'll just ignore you too. So I'm ignoring him. But then he's like going out of his way to bother me and misgender me and like make issues over nothing. Like he tried to take the fact that I had put a bucket in the room because I needed it to handle sharps, for my safety, right? To not get like a needle stick injury. He took that to upper management, and upper management came back, like Brian, who no longer works there because he left because, this place has all these issues. Like, was like, of course there's no problem with you having the bucket in the room. I was like, I know, but this man just wants to fight me for no reason. So eventually I was like, okay, cool. Like, you want to be like that with me? Like, I'll be like that with you. So it was just very much like ice between us. And I wanted to sort of like, almost for like my own sanity, just like, let me get some people to lay eyes on this. Because it can be really oppressive to be like silently dealing
with that
for months. And just, you're not sure if people are like aware of the situation. So I waited till a lot of people were around. And I was like, hey, Sam, do you have a moment? Even me addressing him, like, he rolled his eyes. Like, he was like, oh, my God, I can't believe this person wants to talk to me. The feeling is mutual. But anyways, I was like, I'm wondering if you would be willing to use my pronouns and gender me correctly when you speak to me. And he, like, was shocked. Like, I literally gagged him with that. And he was like, And he paused, and he's like, what's your last name? And I was like, that's not really what I asked you. I asked if you would give me the courtesy of using my pronouns and gendering me correctly. And he kept repeating himself, well, what's your last name? And I was like, Sam, like, again, besides the point. And he's like, one way or another, I'm going to find out what your last name is. And I was like, okay, well, for your information, it's literally printed on a bronze placard next to my face. So, like, there it is, Nunes. He was like, okay, Mr. Nunes, that's what I'll be calling you. And I was like,
Mr. Nunes?
Mr. I was like, that's disrespectful. That's not what I'm asking you to do. Are you intentionally being disrespectful? He's like, those are your words, not mine.
Wow.
Then he just kept saying that. And I'm like, this man is in his, I don't know, 50s, 60s. I think he's in his 60s. I was like, you're a little old for these like childish maneuvers, So I was like, okay, so what you're telling me is you're not willing to be respectful. You're not willing to use my pronouns. And he was like, whatever, hermano, which just means like brother in Spanish. Like all of his gendered language to like further reinforce that he was not going to gender me correctly. And I was like, wow, like that's pretty wild. And he's like, look, I've worked here for 35 years and this has never been a problem. You can go right over there. HR's office is right over there. Go and talk to Wes if you have a problem with it. I'm not going anywhere.
And he said that with confidence.
He said that with confidence, with his chest out. And I was like, wow, okay, this dude really, he stands by that. So the people around me at this point, like their jaws have dropped. They're just like
witnesses.
They had no idea any of this was happening. He's always laughing and kikiing with a bunch of the other people in the office, like, business as usual. I'm the only person he treats this way. So they were like, what was that? And I was like, would you be willing to write down what you heard and like as a formal
complaint?
Yeah, as a documentation of what just went down. So 2 people wrote down what they heard. And I wrote down the full encounter of everything that I heard and sent it off to HR, went and talked to HR. And just as before with Morgan Manry, nothing was done to the point where I ended up losing my job. I ended up leaving because I was like, I can't deal with this anymore. The only thing that happened was that day he sent home the maintenance guy for the rest of the day. I'm guessing that was paid. I'm damn sure he was paid
leave.
I'm sure. There's no way they weren't paying that guy.
But I want to know what exactly, what kind of conversations were happening with HR past that point, right? You had witnesses. You had people write to HR detailing what they witnessed, what they saw that took place between you and Sam. So what conversations were happening with HR? What was going on there?
It was a lot of, oh my God, really? Oh, I'm so sorry. Wow, I can't believe he said that. Oh no, it's unacceptable. Yeah. But Wes has a way of just sort of like saying a lot of nothing, like to avoid making any kind of actual statement.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, Wes, I'm gonna need to know like what will be done to rectify the situation, because I've been dealing with this for so long and I can't continue to work in the presence of this person, because he causes he literally makes my heart rate go up when I see him. Like, don't like this dude.
Yeah.
So the same as before, I kept following back up day after day, being like, okay, like what is the follow through? I saw him the next day, like have some sort of revelation moment, like an aha, and he's like, you know what? This is what we're dealing with. And he pulled out a keychain of his own keychain of the Pope and showed me the Pope as a way to tell me like this is what we're dealing with. And I was just like, the Pope, the same Pope who compared trans people as a greater danger to humanity than nuclear weaponry, the same Pope who says that like non-binary people, or the ability to choose your gender according to him, is like one of the greatest evils that faces modern humanity.
This is the HR manager.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about the Pope.
Yeah.
But like, yes, the HR manager pulls out his personal Pope keychain to explain to me like why no action will be taken against this person. Because the very next day he was back, right? Like he wasn't gone for long.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh my God, like this is insufferable. Like I have to continue to deal with this level of disrespect.
And for further context, you're working at a aid service organization.
Yeah.
That primarily services disenfranchised
Not
folk,
only
but
that,
LGBTQIA plus folk.
Also provides hormone replacement therapy to transgendered people. And there aren't very many places in Central Florida that do. So like there's a significant population of trans people coming in and out of the doors of this organization. And they're knowingly and willfully employing somebody who is like that transphobic to the point of, I never once in 8 months heard my name come out of his mouth. Only disrespect, only sir, only, just someone who's like very petty, childish. So the Pope thing happened and I was a little floored by that, but also not surprised because of the lack of action in the previous instance of discrimination. When we were asked where our master was, I was like, okay, so you have a history of doing nothing and protecting people who've been there for a long time. Mm-hmm. And this is another one of your long-term employees who is also your informant, right? Like, it's going to be hard to make an Indeed profile for a job for maintenance, janitor, and spy. I don't think you can just put that on somebody's job application. So yeah, I definitely felt, and he knew it. The way he told me to go talk to HR, he knew it. He knew that nothing was going to happen. He knew I would be the one on the block. He knew this organization was already out to get us.
Yeah. Wow.
The next day, I went. So the weekend happened, and he kept telling me, "Okay, tomorrow, I'm gonna let you know what's happening. I'm gonna let you know what's happening." HR person. So in the morning, I'm like, "Hey, following up. Like, I'd really love to hear whatever decision you make, because like I can't believe I'm still dealing with this." And he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna have a meeting, and I'll let you know by end of day." So end of day comes around. I'm staying there later than pretty much everybody else to keep the syringe exchange open. And I'm like, all right, well, let me walk over there because he's had literally all day. And so as I'm approaching his room, I hear him on the phone. I hear him on the phone saying that he's on the phone with the legal counsel that's representing them in their current discrimination case, as well as the executive director, Lisa Barr. And he is coming up with strategies for how to remove my position, how to remove Lamia McAdam's position, how to remove Eric Lewis's position, your position, and basically saying, the best way to do this is going to be to just close down the syringe services program, to no longer do harm reduction work at Hope and Help. That way we don't have to fire them. If we just remove the program, we don't have to fire them. So that'll be an easy way to get rid of those 3 employees without terminating them. So I'm like, okay, wow. So the person who I have to go to in this organization to go to bat on my behalf, the person who is going to hold the organization accountable, its employees accountable for being racist and transphobic, he's going overtime, doing work after hours to try and figure out how to remove my position because I'm complaining about constant levels of discrimination in the workplace.
And this was HR, their legal counsel or their legal rep.
Yes.
For their current discrimination suit.
Right.
And the executive director, the ED, Lisa Barr.
Yeah. I'm sure they've had many of these conversations in the past. I mean, the org has a history of EEOC complaints and lawsuits of discrimination in their past. So this is
Yeah.
just the current iteration of them being 0% accountable and basically just, yeah, choosing to deny rather than make any kind of change.
So, I mean, I'm curious to know, like, in your attempts to follow up with HR and figure out what the details were in regards to a solution or resolution, was there an investigation? Did they ever follow up with the two witnesses who waged complaints?
Mm-mm.
There were no investigations. There was no follow up. There was no assurance that you would be protected within the organization after
No,
the verbal assault.
no.
So I guess my question to you now is, ultimately, what were you left with? What was your decision?
To quit. I mean, at that point, like, when you realize that like the stigma against people who are unhoused and the people who use drugs that you work with is now being applied to you, when transphobia is working against you and racism is working against you, is to just leave. I was like, this is not worth what they're paying me, and I will find ways to do that work outside of this organization and to do it better because I won't be dealing with the barriers to care and access that they provide.
And when you left, did you notify
I
anybody?
sure
Did
did.
you?
I wrote a letter. I wrote a long email and sent it to as many people in the contact list as I could find. Basically, just explaining the history that I've just explained to you to make, just to let people know, like, hey, this is something I've silently been dealing with over here. I've tried to go through all the proper channels this organization possesses. Those proper channels have turned against me and are finding creative ways to get rid of my position by terminating a program that provides life-saving resources to people who use drugs in Central Florida. And that level of just like lack of morals and ethics, I can't abide anymore. So I left the organization.
And obviously, you were faced with a very difficult decision. You ultimately left. You wrote this letter. I want to know what your overall intention was in writing the letter, the goal. Like, was this your way of getting back at
No,
management,
I
or?
loved my work. I truly am passionate about harm reduction. I continue to be an advocate for harm reduction and to work with those populations. And it was like kind of a personal tragedy for me to have to choose between my mental health and peace of mind, and the work that I love doing and, am like equipped to do as a harm reduction health educator. So I just wanted to make people aware, like, hey, this, I'm not leaving because this isn't the job for me, because I'm burnt out, because the stress of this or no, like I'm leaving because this organization not only will not protect me, but is actively working against me.
Yeah. And there were parts of your letter. There were certain language. There was a bit of language that you included in your letter that leadership would end up taking issue with. There was one mention, a phrase you mentioned, "white woman
Yes, I
fragility."
refer to the executive director as, yeah, white woman fragility.
Yeah, and they obviously took issue with that. Can you explain or expand upon what you meant when you employed that phrase,
Yeah.
and what that meant about the executive director's leadership?
So I had to throw it all the way back to the beginning in that all hands meeting on my fourth day there. The prevention manager at the time, who they ended up firing on trumped up reasons
Mm-hmm.
because she has advocated for people left and right, um, she she was not having what HR was saying in that meeting, trying to kind of like whitewash and blanket everything and say, no, everything's fine here. And was actively speaking out and being like, no, actually, like the state of things for trans people here is not great. Like, that's why we're having this meeting. That's why this is important. Like, stop trying to act like everything's fine. So she's over here advocating, which is what ultimately led to her termination. Um, I don't think very many people were aware of this, maybe except for the executive director, but apparently at some point she took off her denim jacket. I mean, it was hot in the room, right? There's a lot of people and it was getting heated.
Yeah.
That's it. I guess the executive director wanted to have some sort of disciplinary action because she felt personally threatened that this Puerto Rican woman has taken off her jacket. Mind you, this is a big conference room, and like we're talking, they're on the opposite ends of it. So like how that could be perceived as a physical threat is like way beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
Nor did I or pretty much anybody else notice this, right? Like it was literally just like take off my jacket. That, I mean, that is the definition. The
Yeah,
further
for sure.
definition of white woman fragility is that rather than taking into account any of the instances of discrimination or the oppressive work culture I had to endure for almost 8 months,
Yes.
the only takeaway that upper management took in their response to my email was that I used discriminatory and disparaging language. In my 7-paragraph email, they just took the phrase white woman fragility and said I was writing a disparaging document, basically. That, yeah, they said I was being discriminatory as I paint a full picture of what actual discrimination looks like.
And what you endured, like those 6 months.
Yeah, because I'm calling out the executive director for, trying to take disciplinary action against a Puerto Rican woman for removing her jacket.
I want to know, Anita, for you, what do you want to see happen with Hope and Health? What does justice look like for you? After everything that you dealt with, after everything that you went through, ideally, what would you like to see happen within the organization?
They should be stripped of quite a lot. They have no right or reason to be housing a syringe services program. I've heard
Clearly.
other staff members referring to our participants as crackheads. Just the overall culture and just the stigmatization of people who use drugs there is like out of this world. So they're just not suited to be housing that program. They really shouldn't be providing HRT, hormone replacement services for trans people. If they're gonna ride and stand by an employee who's that transphobic, you shouldn't be receiving money from grant makers for trans healthcare, which they do.
And to be clear, till this day, he's still employed at the organization.
Yes, both of those people are still employed at the organization. Wow. And yeah, they still are spending money that is intended for trans people and intended for people who use drugs, intended for people of color. They are actually racking up quite a lot of income. I believe their gross income last year was like, what was it?
I think 29 million.
25 million. I don't know, 25 or 29. It's quite a lot of millions of dollars to not be
for a nonprofit.
Yeah, to be doing good work. So I don't know. Community accountability would be great. I mean, it's really an oppressive climate and culture in Florida right now for trans people in general.
Yeah.
So just any kind, like all they've done is deny. They denied everything I said. They denied everything you said. They denied anything anyone has said. To the contrary of them just being this perfect organization. Like, I would love for the community at large to hold them accountable. And yeah, I don't even know what accountability could look like with an org that's willing to go so far to just
malign their employees.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously leadership isn't effective. So I mean, that calls into concern about whether or not they even deserve to be holding their positions.
Needs to go. The HR person needs to go. Morgan Manry needs to go. The maintenance guy, Sam, needs to go. The board of directors and their just complete lack of action and the disrespect in their letter, like they need to go. And at that point, you're talking about there goes the whole org. So like, I don't know. If you're a grant maker, like please divest. Seek help elsewhere. Wow. Fund somebody else, please. Or hold your grant recipients to like greater standards of accountability for discrimination and for like the well-being of marginalized peoples.
Well, I mean, Anita, you talked about a lot in this interview. Hopefully, I hope you're doing well. You're able to work on your own projects and community-based events outside of Hope and Health. Mm-hmm. I want you to tell us what you're working on, what you're doing, and if there's anything else you'd like to share, feel free.
Fridge is doing great. You know, we're cooking up meals. We're feeding unhoused people, food insecure people. It's work I've been doing before I started Hope and Help, during my time at Hope and Help. Expanding into schools. We're going to be doing 3 new community gardens this spring and summer. It's been, honestly, since I left, I've felt this huge weight off my shoulders after leaving Hope and Help, and just kind of like feel boosted and doing the work that actually like now I'm only working with people who, you know, respect me, who value my identity and what I bring, you know, my skills. So just that alone makes it so much easier to make advancements in all of the like food justice work. And I'm excited now to be continue to bring harm reduction to Central Florida outside of that oppressive structure.
Yeah.
In the form of like distributing Narcan and safer injection supplies and providing testing for STIs and HIV and, you know, just doing the same work basically, just without the massive budget of Open Help, like, unfortunately, but making it work.
That sounds amazing. And is there anywhere you want people to find you? people to support?
You can always support at Neighborhood Fridge on Instagram. Check us out. We're always needing volunteers, donations. We're about to have a fundraiser go live for a new community garden in Paramore. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing everything that you shared.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and that's a wrap.